Seoul is home to BTS and K-pop, but it was only a few years back that Seoul started to gain international attention thanks to Psy's Gangnam Style. The song triggered the K-pop fervor, and since then, Seoul has been recognized as the global cultural powerhouse. From music to entertainment to beauty to fashion, Korea has become known to be at the forefront of trend. And it doesn't stop there. Seoul is burgeoning with startups, and innovation is taking place in every corner of the city. South Korea is the 10th largest economy in the world. But it's not just Samsung, LG, and Hyundai that are spearheading the economy. Many local entrepreneurs and innovators are adding valuable input to propelling the country's growth and recognition in the world. Throughout this week-long global studio, you'll be virtually visiting Seoul and meeting with industry professionals in different fields, hearing the stories behind their success and how they're paving their way in times of uncertainty. I'm Seoyoung Yoon, your fellow gems from the inaugural cohort, and I'll be your local guide and host throughout this virtual journey. I hope this global studio week will be a great learning opportunity for you to take away industry insights and also entice you to visit Seoul in person.
Well, I usually describe Seoul as a very, very large city that is at the same time extremely easy to get around and safe. I tell people there's always something to do, and at the same time, it's really easy to run into your friends in your neighborhood, right? So it has kind of the best qualities of I think like LA and New York kind of mixed together.
예전 같으면 낮밤이 없는 도시라고 설명을 했었을 것 같아요. 왜냐하면 밤에도 밝고 밤에도 많은 문화활동들을 즐길 수 있는 곳이 서울이었으니까. 근데 이제 코로나19로 인해서 10시면 많은 상점들이 문을 닫는 바람에 이렇게 소개할 수는 없겠지만 코로나19가 끝나고 다른 외국인 분들이 많이 찾아올 수 있는 경기가 회복이 된다면 그때는 또 서울을 낮밤이 없는 도시로 기억할 수 있지 않을까, 그리고 즐길 수 있지 않을까라고 생각이 듭니다.
Seoul's one of those cities, one of those few cities around the world that I feel like has everything a visitor could want. It has the culinary experiences, right? The world-class food. It has the history and all of the culture that goes along with that history. Museum after museum after museum. It has the wide open roads to drive along and see the modern city, but it also has those pockets that the city gets narrow and small, but it becomes traditional, and you can see what life was like in a different generation. Of course, has a great nightlife as well, and so if you are a night owl, sometimes like me, you'll be able to enjoy the city for all that it has. And so I think because of all of all of these options, the city really is incredibly vibrant. One of the best places I think that I've ever visited for a variety of activities. I think Seoul will really surprise people. Even if you think you know what the city is about, maybe because you're like me and you watched Korean shows and Korean movies and listened to Korean music, I think it will surprise you. It really is that mix of everything. If you have in your mind that Korea is still a very traditional society, you will be surprised by how incredibly modern and cosmopolitan Seoul can be. If you think of Seoul as the city of skyrises and of incredible technologies, you will be surprised at how traditional, how still socially conservative the city can be. If you think that Seoul is only about Korean food, you'll be surprised by how many amazing global chefs and global cuisines are represented in the city. If you don't like Korean food, you'll also be surprised by how varied Korean food can be, and I guarantee you'll find something that you love. So I think that Seoul is surprising to everyone who visits for the first time.
Especially now more than ever. Like What does make it special is how quickly it's changing. Neighborhoods are changing so quickly. Businesses and restaurants are popping up and changing at an amazing rate. But at the same time, like the services through the different startups that are, growing here, really are transforming everything at a really a special kind of like pace and rate. So living here at this time, my friends and I all talk about it all the time, right? I mean, it's a great place to live. Living here during COVID has been really great for us because of how well Korea has handled it, and we're all very thankful to be here.
소위 해외에서 힙하다라고 불리는 카페나 레스토랑 혹은 클럽 이런 것들이 우리나라에 들어올 때 가장 먼저 들어오는 지역이 서울이다 보니 이런 부분에서 굉장히 트렌드에 밝게 살 수 있다라는 점은 되게 좋은 것 같아요.
Because this city is about change, constant reinvention. As you know, maybe the Koreans are called early adopters. So they always want something new, they want some new trends. And so I have been experiencing over the last decade, I've been living here and then I've been living in Shanghai, in China. I've been traveling around Asia, and each time I've been back here and I always witness some change. Even after 2 weeks, you have something new in the street, new shops everywhere. So Seoul is a constantly changing city. One of the reasons I like living in Seoul is the energy that it provides to me. And as a journalist, as someone who has to cover news, has cover the evolution of our societies, I feel Seoul is a good place to be. It's a fascinating place to be, to understand where our world is going. Because the Koreans always want to taste the new trend, they want to taste the new things. So here you always witness in the street, in the restaurants, in the shops, new approach to things, new trends. And for this reason I feel I learn a lot here because there is energy. So this energy is both exciting and also both exhausting, I have to say sometimes, because it's sometimes a constant move and no time to relax. Seoul is not a place to relax, it's a place to experience, it's a place to enjoy, it's a place to learn, it's a place to push yourself, it's a place of competition in the heart of Asia. And that's the reason why I find it exciting to live here, and that's why I think people want to visit here to get a taste of what's happening in this part of the world.
I've been to major cities in other countries like London, Tokyo, and New York, and then I had this impression that all the stores close really early. And then Seoul, there are restaurants that runs for 24 hours, and people walk around the streets late at night. So I think it's one very special characteristic of Seoul. That a city never sleeps.
There's still so much more of Seoul I have not even begun to explore. That's why I want to keep going back. It really is. It feels like a different city every single time I visit, and I still have my long list of new things I want to try there, and it might take me years, if ever, to complete that list. And I learn something new every single time I go, and it's one of those cities that it doesn't get boring, right? If you are someone who is curious, who is constantly chasing after new experience and new knowledge, Seoul is definitely a place for you to visit. So for me, that's what makes Seoul so unique and so special.
다른 도시에 비해서 서울이 월등히 좋은 점이 있다면 그 부분은 아무래도 교통시설일 것 같아요. 정말 새로 신식으로 깐 그 어마어마한 지하철, 그리고 촘촘히 뚫려있는 버스 노선, 이런 부분들이 밤 늦게 이동해도 어디든 안전하고 빠르고 쾌적하게 움직일 수 있겠다라는 그런 강한 믿음을 주고요. 저희는 스마트폰으로 버스가 언제 오는지, 몇 시에 올 건지, 배차 간격 등을 쉽게 알 수 있어서 그런 부분들도 플러스 버스 노선이 버스 정류장이 몇 번의 버스가 언제 올 거다라는 게 계속 안내가 되고요. 이런 부분들이 대중교통을 사람들이 편안하게 느끼게 하고 이거 없이는 살기 어렵다라고 느끼게 하는 요소인 것 같아요. 예전에는 런던에 한번 산 적이 있는데 런던 같은 경우는 튜브에서는 그때 한참 인터넷이 안 됐었어요. 지금도 테러 때문에 아마 금지되어 있는 것으로 알고 있는데 서울에서는 그것과 달리 이런 스마트폰이라던가 이런 대중교통 시설에서 이런 인터넷이라던가 이런 기반 시설들이 굉장히 잘 돼 있어서 편안함과 쾌적함을 같이 누리실 수 있을 것 같아요.
Seoul's public transportation is excellent. It's clean, it is on time, it is extremely fast. So it will take a little bit of getting used to. You have to actually look up some guides on how to properly use the transportation system because you actually have to get preloaded cards for that. But once you figure it out, it really is the easiest way to get around town, and it is a very, very enjoyable experience.
When I think about living here, I think it's different than a lot of other places around the world that I've lived in. And I think, first, there is a comfort into how easy it is to get around. It's also, extremely safe. And so you really don't have those, worries you might have in other cities. But also, it's such a big city. So as you travel around and go to different neighborhoods, whether they're cafes to restaurants or bars, you always find something new to do. I find living in Korea really convenient, in not COVID times to also travel around the region. And it's a great hub across Asia to also bounce, whether it's to the US or Europe. And so I find that not just doing business, but living in Korea has a lot of personal benefits as well.
한국 사람들은 굉장히 큰 민족적인 특징이라고 하면 빠름인 것 같아요. 그래서 인터넷도 조금만 느려도 속 터져 하는 사람들이기 때문에 굉장히 빠르게 발달이 되고, 그리고 요새 카카오페이라던가 뭐 이런 식으로 저희가 자동으로 결제할 수 있는 시스템 같은 경우도 도입이 굉장히 빨라요. 이런 한국 사람들의 성향을 반영한 것이 아닐까 싶을 정도로 조금 많이 빠르게 도입되고 각종 가게에서도 다 스마트폰으로 결제할 수 있는 시스템을 많이 갖추고 있고요.
I think Seoul is a fascinating place because at the same time the Koreans are so good at catching all its trends, but at the same time they catch trends to better assert their own identity. This is what K-pop is about in a way. You catch K-pop is just a mismatch of a lot of things from around the world, but they create something unique and repackage it and resell it to the world. So this is Korean identity. It's in constant flux, constantly transforming what exists into something different in order to survive, to assert themselves as a country, as a nation, and as a city.
Korean people shy because I think we have this social custom that we have to refrain from talking to strangers as they might feel uncomfortable, but so shy. But once you go through this awkward moment, then Koreans are really thoughtful, delightful people, and we definitely drink a lot.
The people, even though it's a big city, the people in this city relatively kind to the foreigners, and I think that's a good thing for foreigners to feel comfortable when they come to Korea. We are quite ingenious and very creative, and I think that being creative, characteristics of our being creative and the ingenious are showing through the blossoming of our culture export to the rest of the world. That one is a K-pop. Everybody loves the K-pop. Like 10 years ago, when I talked with the foreigners, they said that the K-pop is just the small-time phenomenon. They would disagree with me that either to be as big as the British pop culture or American pop culture. But here we are. We have seen the cake culture is reaching its point of maturity.
I think one of the main challenges of living in Seoul, of course, is that still today, it's still, of course, as a foreigner, there are very few foreigners here compared to some other big megalopolis in Asia, like let's say Hong Kong or Singapore. And here, the younger people are speaking increasingly English, but still living here if you don't speak Korean can be challenging sometimes on a daily basis. It's challenging sometimes even to do like a payment online, because if you're not in the current system, you're not going to be able to purchase this. There's a lot of apps that are not working that are working all globally, that are not working here because of many regulations to protect the market here. So you are here in a place that is not a Western place, and that's to me the interesting part to it. That's what I like about it.
I think the fact that I had to, live in China before living in Korea kind of made it so language was less of a difficulty, in comparison. But at the same time, I do think things, especially the last 5-10 years here in Korea, have really changed in terms of English, around the city, and I personally attribute a lot of it to YouTube and Netflix. But I think at the same time, I'm personally still having Korean class, 2 or 3 times a week. So trying my best to, find that middle ground. But my Korean is always going to not be good.
저는 예전에 경기도 그러니 서울 근처에 있는 지방 도시에서 살았었는데 그쪽에 이제 신도시라고 해서 계획도시인 분당이라는 곳에서 살고 있었어요. 근데 거기 같은 경우는 일단 계획도시다 보니까 도로도 굉장히 정비가 깔끔하게 되어 있고 치안도 굉장히 안전하다는 생각이 들었었고요. 근데 서울은 그에 반면에 계획도시가 아니다 보니까 때로는 걷기가 힘들다라는 생각이 들 때가 있어요. 그러니까 강남같이 이미 개발 이후에 들어온 그런 지역 같은 경우는 도로와 인도가 굉장히 명확하게 구분되어 있어서 걷기가 쉬운데 강북 같은 경우는 그런 부분들이 좀 미흡할 때가 있어요. 그래서 인도가 없거나 그냥 차도와 사람이 같이 다니는 좁은 길들이 많다거나 제가 혼자 다닐 때는 어려움이 없었는데 아이와 같이 유모차를 끌고 다니게 되면서 그 부분에 대해서 굉장히 피곤하고 좀 불안할 때가 있었어요. 서울살이에서 또 어려운 점은 집값이 너무 높다는 거예요. 그러니까 최근에 집값이 거의 3-4배 가까이 올랐어요. 그래서 서울의 다른 지역으로 이사를 가고 싶어도 저희 집보다 천정부지로 높게 설정된 그 해당 가격 때문에 쉽게 이주를 못하는 점? 그런 부분들이 굉장히 어렵고 이제 저 말고 주변에 싱글인 친구들 이야기를 들어보면 원룸으로 살고 있으면 이제 삶의 질 자체가 많이 떨어짐에도 불구하고 집값 때문에 이동이 어렵다는 얘기를 많이들 하시더라고요.
Well, there are two major challenges I think that visitors are going to encounter. The first one is language. Even though English signage is around the city, so you should be able to get around via signage. Not everyone speaks English, and there's no reason why they would. It's Korea, and so obviously they all speak Korean, and but it does the language barrier does make it more difficult to get around than some other Asian cities where English proficiency is a little bit higher. The second thing that makes it a little difficult for visitors is that all of the apps and the tools that are used in Seoul and in Korea are different than the ones that I think visitors from Western countries are used to. So Google Maps doesn't really work. The messaging services are not the ones that we're used to in the Western world. to call a taxi and to call some kind of a car. Uber works, but it's not the easiest way to be able to find transportation. And so those are the things I think people are going to have to get used to. But once you figure it out and once you get a card and start using public transportation, it really becomes a city that's quite easy to explore. I think the Republic of Korea and Seoul in particular is very, very important to the world for two primary reasons. The first is that it really is a nexus point of sometimes geopolitical tension and other times geopolitical cooperation. Seoul's position among the East Asian leaders and its position not only connected to the peninsula that is still a very, very complicated place, its relationship with China, its relationship with Japan, its long-term relationship with the United States means that it is a fascinating bellwether to the health of geopolitical relationships in Asia. The second reason why I think Seoul and Korea are so important is because of technology. And Korea continues to be a technology innovator, not only for Asia, but for the entire world. Samsung continues to be an innovator and really has defined over the course of the last many years what a mobile device should look like, the features that we ought to expect, the quality of mobile devices today. And Samsung's likely to continue leading the pack in that sense around the world. So paying attention to Korea means you'll understand the changing waves in geopolitics, but also the upcoming trends in consumer electronics.
One thing I remember when I moved at the beginning in 2009, at the beginning there was very few foreigners here. You have to understand that Seoul is not like Singapore or Hong Kong, far less international exposure still today. And at that time I remember even walking downtown in Gwanggwamun, which is one of the historic center of Seoul, and when I saw a Western face, we couldn't help having a high contact. And we were kind of saying, oh, what are you doing here? You too, are you lost here? I'm talking about only 10 years ago. It sounds strange, even to me, because today Seoul, I mean, of course, is full of international people, foreigners. The city has become a magnet for a lot of young people because of Hallyu, the Korean wave, the cultural Korean wave, K-pop, movies. So I think of the last 10 years, through my work as a journalist, I witnessed how Korea and Seoul has become on the map. It was not before, but thanks to their dynamism, the inhabitant of the city and the economy of South Korea has managed to exist per se. And these days, nobody asks me, oh, you're in Korea, are you in North Korea? Now when they think about Korea, they think about South Korea, they think about Seoul, and I think that's one of the most exciting things I've been experiencing over the decade I've been living here, is to see how a city keeps changing, keeps transforming itself, and somehow keep improving too. I would say the living standard, the lifestyle here, as quality of life has improved. It's still quite a big British megalopolis, still a lot of motorways, still a lot of pollution, still a lot of noise, but you can, as a pedestrian, you can start to enjoy more sidewalks, more parks, you can start to enjoy more smaller little alleys. So the city is also improving on a daily basis, I would say.
So I was originally born here in Korea, but I was adopted to the U.S. And I came back for the first time when I was 24, and I was able to meet my birth family. And so every year after that, I've been coming back to Korea for about a week. And so being able to live here full time, I mean, I really feel as if I'm able to see how much Seoul and Korea has changed. Coming here for work, it was a bit of a learning process in terms of how to adapt to the different work cultures. Every time I would come back, I would get to explore a different part of the country. But in terms of I think macro observations, one, it's become a bit easier to do business over the years. Two, I think that just generally the food scene here in Korea has really evolved, and there's a lot of really great restaurants serving all types of food, which is very different than when I first came here. And then three, I think that there's been just a general interest in Korea from all over the world. For our company and for our startup, for 3 out of the 4 main investors we have, it was their first time investing in Asia, let alone Korea. So it's really been interesting to see how everything has changed. Just thinking about how things have evolved here, but also comparing it to other countries that I've lived, like in China or worked, such as like Japan or Hong Kong. I mean, I think first things have really become a lot easier to get around the city. There's a number of car sharing apps or ride sharing apps, but also over the years they've also adapted the apps to be in English. There's a lot of focus on making things accessible. The subway here is very easy to get around, and just generally, the city itself has become much more, I think, easy to navigate for foreigners or people moving or working here for the first time.
Living for 6 decades in this city, I have seen a lot of changes. When I was young, this is what Seoul is now. It was a very small town with very few high-rise buildings, even in downtown area. But all things change rapidly throughout from 1970s and 80s. The Seoul had undergone a rapid improvement in terms of the office space and the number of the people. And I started my journalistic career in 1988 when Seoul Olympics were held. It was Korea was a developing country then, and still under the remnant of the dictatorship. And from that point on, it underwent explosive growth, not just in appearances, but in substance as well.
I think a lot of the questions I get asked by people when they come here is not just what to do, but also what is it like to work here. I think when I was at WeWork, we kind of got to experience a lot of that change during the last 5-6 years. The working environments here and like the ways that you kind of think about the different work cultures or localization, I think it's definitely changed a lot. I think a lot of the more kind of global standards and how people adapt to now taking so many meetings over Zoom. I think everything that happened last year, with COVID really changed things even faster in terms of how people do business. And just the, I think, general use of English in the work environment has changed as well. But also the rise of kind of startups and entrepreneurship has been something that the Korean government and just generally everyone here has been pretty focused on building up over the years. I used to always have a routine of what I would do when guests would come in, especially from my time at WeWork. We'd have a lot of people visiting. So what I would typically do is one, always bring them to the fish market, which everyone has seen on Conan O'Brien. Two, I would try to bring them to some sort of outdoor thing. So if it's possible, I'd take them to a baseball game or something like that. And then the other thing I always would do is just really bring them around to some of my favorite restaurants and introduce them to my friends here. I think, whether it's thinking about language or, culture, being able to expose them not just to the places but the people was, I think, just as impactful, and I know that they're all still staying in touch.
제가 다양하게 친구들한테 소개했던 지역들 중에 많이들 좋아했던 곳은 북촌 한옥마을이라던가 전통적으로 큰 빌딩 숲과 한옥이 어우러진 공간을 굉장히 선호하고 그 부분을 독특하게 여기더라고요. 그래서 그런 부분들을 많이 소개를 해줄 것 같아요. 그래서 지금은 많이 코로나로 인해서 에어비앤비가 많이 없어진 걸로 알고 있는데 기회가 된다면 호텔 숙박뿐만 아니라 이런 전통 에어비앤비 그러면서 깔끔하게 외국인들이 머물 수 있는 그런 곳들도 많이 소개를 해주고 싶어요. 아이가 있는 친구라면 아이와 함께 키즈 카페를 구경을 시켜주고 싶어요. 우리나라의 키즈 카페가 굉장히 다양하게 다채롭게 준비되어 있거든요. 근데 외국에서는 그런 부분들이 되게 미흡하거나 없다고 생각 많이 들었어요. 그래서 그런 부분들을 많이 소개를 해주고 싶고 아이들과 함께 놀고 체험할 수 있는 공간 위주로 소개를 해줄 것 같아요. 그리고 싱글 친구들이라면 이게 코로나19라는 되게 전 세계적인 이런 흐름 안에서 제가 어떤 부분들을 소개해 줄 수 있을지 이제 언택트로 소개시켜 줄 수 있을지 고민이 되긴 하는데 한국의 클럽이라던가 포차라던가 이런 밤문화를 굉장히 신기해 하더라고요.
I wanted to invite them and come and experience, what Seoul offers. Seoul has a lot of things. Even though I have lived in this city throughout my life, much of the city, I should admit that I'm not familiar with, and especially the pace of the development and pace of changes we are seeing in this city. I think it's the best advice or best the things I can tell to the foreigners who are planning to visit Seoul or who haven't visited Seoul is to come and experience this city yourself.
There is one primary reason that I go to Seoul, and it is to eat. So if you go to Seoul and you don't spend most of your time and most of your day looking for food, experiencing all the different kinds of Korean food that that exists, I think you'll be missing out. So that is where I would take first-time visitors to Seoul, is just to walk around the city to eat.
코리안 바베큐라던가 갈비라던가 이제 달콤한 간장 베이스의 음식을 하는 이제 지역별 맛집들을 많이 소개를 해줄 것 같고요. 노량진 시장, 해산물 시장이라던가 아니면 뭐 광장시장이라던가 이런 곳에서 먹을 수 있는 길거리 음식이라던가 아니면 회라던가 이런 부분들을 굉장히 좋아했었고 그 부분이 특색이 있다고 느꼈었던 걸로 저는 기억해요. 그래서 그 부분 같이 추천해주고 싶어요.
Seoul is a busy, bustling city, full of energy and spirit. It's dynamic and constantly changing. I hope these interviews helped you get a better understanding of Seoul. But to fully understand, you'll have to come and experience the city yourself.